But um, but I think that, the imagination, you can literally create characters with their own internal motivations and their own dreams, their own desires, their own identity. And you can use that in a creative way, like to write a book. You can use that in a therapeutic way, like an EMDR. You can, it's just unbelievable.
There's actually no way to not do this. It's just the way that most people do it is they have an inner critic that is the loudest voice in their head. That is fed and is fueled by the energy of shame. And that after enough time, they just assume that that's who they are. This is where people become depressed and anxious and ultimately suicidal. That's the perspective that has the microphone. And over time, it's just because it's the loudest one, it's the one that forces their opinion most. The squeaky wheel gets the grease and all that. Over time, we just assume that's who we are, but it's not. I think it's fascinating, man. I'm sorry, I cut you off. I cut you off.
That's all I had to say about it.
Well, I think it's fascinating. Again, going back to this idea of what is writing fiction all about? And isn't fiction truer than true? And what is this mechanism of story and even making up stories? We still get to something that's truer than true. And I've heard that from a few different authors that write fiction, that they just they don't know where it's going, but they know how to get there. Like they just kind of start creating, and then these characters form, and then the characters start leading them and having a mind of their own, and the writer just documents it. Mm-hmm. Such an interesting way to look at it. This is also what method acting's all about, is the character comes from within the actor. Now, it might even be based on a real person in history, but the only way it works, is, in my understanding of method acting, is you have to find something in there for yourself using your imagination and then embody it and become it. And the best method actors are not the truest representation of the original person, if that's based on a historical character. But they are the truest form of that person that they can express because they've gone deep within themselves to do it. Just an interesting question. It's an interesting thing to explore. And then the last thing I'll say is, excuse me if I've already brought this reference up, but Mr. Rogers. If any of y'all saw that movie with Tom Hanks playing him.
I didn't.
I think it was from that movie, or maybe it was a documentary I watched about him. But Mr. Rogers, when you go, if you remember, if you've ever seen the show, you go into this place called it's not Neverland. It's like the land of make believe, I think. Mm-hmm. And that little train car goes through the tunnel, and then all of a sudden it arrives in this made up land. Each of the characters in that land, from the king to the princess to I think there's like a little like cat looking thing. It's been a while since I've watched the show, but those are all
Katerina Kitty Cat. Excuse me.
Katerina Kitty Cat.
Yeah, that's her name. Only reason because there's a kids show.
I was more of a Sesame Street guy myself, but all of those characters are his childhood stuffed animals.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he was essentially a lonely kid that had to entertain himself. And so how he did that was he had these stuffed animals and he just started making up voices for them. And all of a sudden he wasn't alone anymore. And he found something so magical in that experience that he wanted to share it with other kids that might be feeling the same way. Now look what he's doing. He's a little kid projecting his personality into these stuffed animals, into these inanimate objects. And he's breathing life into them and therefore integrating with himself. How amazing.
Good grief.
That takes courage and just audacity to put yourself out like that. But you can feel it when you watch Mr. Rogers. There's something it's almost uncomfortable how sweet it is. Because you can tell it's coming from like such a place of genuine imagination and
kindness.
For other people. It's so rare.
It is so rare, and you're right. It's almost uncomfortable how kind he is, because we don't see it in the world very often. And so it's weird.
It's almost you want to doubt it. Like,
And yet,
Right.
what's wrong with this dude?
and yet he can get on a New York subway with a bunch of people from all walks of life, and they'll start singing his own song to
Absolutely.
him. You know, won't
So
you
there's-
be my neighbor?
There's something that calls out to us, like this is the way it could be, right?
Uh-huh.
Like this is the way we all could be. And I was thinking about this. The world needs who you could be.
Hmm.
It may not need who you are right now. Does that make sense?
And I
Like-
don't, and I would say those are the same person,
Right.
but in a different. But I see what you're saying in the
Yeah.
through the scale of time.
Right. Like, be bold enough to start with yourself and become the person you could be, because the world needs that person. Don't be complacent with standing in mediocrity, right? I'm not talking about I'm not even talking about just success. I'm just talking about like the success as the world defines. I'm talking about just genuine you. Like the truth of who you are.
Yeah.
If everyone you know lived up to their full potential, what would that world look like? And you can't control what the rest of the people in your life do, but you can control you, and that inspires others. Mr. Rogers, him embodying the epitome of kindness and goodness and gentleness, has inspired millions of other people, at least to a degree, to try to do the same.